Now let's turn to Lucy. To Lucy's co-workers, she was not the sweet, loony, screwball redhead she portrayed on the I Love Lucy show. In fact, co-workers were usually afraid of her. You know the type. You want to have as little interaction as possible because the person might take something the wrong way, and the next thing you know, you're fired. Here is Lucy on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, and notice how she comes across.
My daughter's in love with Minneapolis. Hello.
Really?
Hello, Doc. Love you. See you more than I do Johnny. I come here often just to see Johnny. And I'm getting a lot more sleep lately because you haven't been on much.
Oh, well, come on now. You know I adore you.
I didn't say anything about whether you like me or not. I said
true.
I'm getting a lot more sleep because you're not on.
Well, I'm back now.
Since you went on, I, started staying awake until after... Stop nodding. You don't know that.
It's the age. He's just like...
She has a bit of a gruff, abrasive exterior, someone who likes to dominate and run the show. She was known for being blunt, caustic, abrasive, lacking tact, giving crass, insensitive criticisms, and humiliating people in front of others. And this includes the way she dealt with some well-known celebrities guest starring on the show. Milton Berle said she was bossy. Jack Benny said she needed a psychiatrist. Books on the Arnaz's bio are riddled with insensitive remarks Lucy had made.
Well, we've not always had the problem of not being able to run our cameras in closer. But which causes the shadows?
She wanted total control over every single thing that was done, from the mic man, the boom man, the lights, every writing thing, who did the hair.
Excuse me, I just saw something. What camera is he working in now with that?
Over here.
That's what I thought.
Over there.
And that ain't right.
She definitely was tough. But I mean that in the good sense of the word.
There are nice things she did to people as well. It's by no means all bad. She did have the caring, protective, motherly side she exhibited when the time called for it. But she liked to take over the show, often battling with the director, giving stage directions, pretty much usurping his job. Richard Keith, who played Little Ricky on the show, said you had to walk softly around her sometimes. She had a temper. She would slam doors. She had a big heart and could be a joy to be around, but I was either in awe or scared of the lady. Lucy Arnaz Jr. said, my father had very strict rules on what he would let my mother do and what he wouldn't let her do. He used to tell me, when your mother and I were married, I never let her go on a talk show because she was so completely different from what the public thought Lucy Ricardo was like that he didn't want to shock them. Why do I bring this up? It's not to besmirch her character or reputation. It's to explain the rising sign that comes up. From the rectification, she was born at high noon. It's sort of a fitting horoscope that someone of her stellar caliber would be born at 12 noon exactly. I have never run across someone born exactly at high noon. That is EST time, not true local time, in which case she would have had her sun smack on the 10th house cusp. Her sun sits dignified high near the zenith of the chart in Leo, the sign of entertainment. Sun on the 10th not only inclines you to be ambitious, but it can confer honors and recognition in your field. In any case, this gives her Scorpio rising. So the overbearingness, the domination, the fear she instilled in co-workers comes from this rising sign. This got more obvious as she got older, especially after Desi left the company and she had the responsibility of keeping the company solvent square on her shoulders. She became more of a perfectionist, more demanding, more domineering, more taking over the jobs of other people. She was Scorpio rising on steroids. Now, in defense of Lucy, she criticized people because she knew her stuff. She was trying the patience of Richard Burton, for example, telling him how to say his lines, which infuriated him. How dare she humiliate an actor of his caliber by criticizing him in front of other people? But Richard Burton did not normally do slapstick comedy. Lucy would say that after this line, count 1001, 1002 to give the audience a chance to respond with a laugh, and by now she had all this down to a science. Many people ultimately admitted she was right.
Lucille Ball knew what she wanted. She was called a ball breaker, she was called all these things. She would say to the cameraman, Charlie, you're an inch and a half further back. And they'd say, oh, Miss Ball, no, I'm not. She'd say, measure. She was right. She would say to you, when you take the coffee cup and you put it over here, hold, and we would rehearse it now. Hold for 2 beats, because that's what the laugh is going to be. And then you do it at night in front of the audience, and you held, and the laugh was 2 beats. She knew her stuff. She was smart. All business.
According to this chart, her ruler Mars' detriment in the marriage 7th in Taurus, the indulgent sign of wine, women, and song, and that was Desi Arnaz, wasn't it? She had no real power over Desi in keeping him faithful. When you have the ruler of the 1st, detriment in the 7th, you're at the disposal of the other person. When the ruler of the 7th is in your 1st, the other person is at your disposal. Sometimes the other person depends on you for his own survival, or the other person is so in love with you he will do anything to keep from giving you up. Her ruler Mars, square to the Sun in Leo in the 10th, shows Desi's romantic trysts humiliated her. With Mars conjunct Saturn in the 7th, this was a very difficult and trying marriage. She had to deal with the emotional turmoil of his constantly cheating on her, and worse, his drinking. Jupiter conjunct her ascendant in Scorpio can give huge salary potential. Jupiter conjunct the ascendant gives you the best of whatever the sign therein represents. So in Scorpio, it can put a high price tag on your head. It can make you highly desirous, exuding sexiness. Supermodel Claudia Schiffer has Jupiter in Scorpio hovering around her ascendant. Notice Jupiter opposing Mars in the money signs, Taurus and Scorpio. Lucy and Desi had separate finances. She did not want joint bank accounts. Lucy tended to save. Desi threw his money around. He also gambled. You notice Lucy's co-ruler Pluto is in Gemini. She knew what was funny or how to make something funny and had excellent comic timing. Her comedic talent wasn't discovered until The Fuller Brush Girl, one of her last movies before her contract expired. Studio heads were thinking, maybe that's what they should be casting her in. Comedies, screwball comedies, farces. Because up to this point, she was only cast in dramas. But by then, the big brass had already made up their minds and decided not to renew her contract. So Lucy wound up going into radio. Back when television was in its infancy, studios took huge losses when a new television series didn't pan out. So they decided to test a show on the radio first. If the radio series garnered an audience, then they turned it into a television series. Gunsmoke started out on the radio. Lucy worked on My Favorite Husband for 3 years. Almost right out the gate, it proved to be a hit show with the audiences. It was this show that morphed into I Love Lucy. Here is a sample of My Favorite Husband. Notice Lucy's excellent diction.
About that habit you have of twisting the truth around.
Well, I have to go milk a cow.
Come back here and sit down. Now, Liz, I want you to promise me never to tell anything but the truth. I don't want to ever catch you lying again.
Neither do I. I didn't want you to catch me this time.
Notice the Saturn trine Venus aspect. This gives longevity in the marriage. These planets are in the earthy signs of Taurus and Virgo. Making money and having a job had a lot to do with the longevity of their marriage. When studio heads were ready to convert the radio show to a TV show, Lucy insisted that Desi played the husband. This had a lot more to do with saving her marriage. Now she can keep an eye on Desi, and he can ditch the nightclub scene, which he was ready to dump way back in his too many girls days. Now going back to their early years, as far as saving their marriage goes, Did they ever have a marriage? Not only were their careers keeping them apart, but Desi got drafted. It was awful, she recalled. You can't conduct a marriage on the phone. You can't have children on the phone. We were in our 8th year, and we'd spent something like 7.5 of them apart. Since they were married from November 30th, 1940 to May 4th, 1960, which constitutes 19.5 years of marriage, subtract 7.5 years, which brings us to 12 years of actual marriage. And those years weren't so hot. In 1944, Lucy attempted to divorce Desi because she believed he was screwing everybody at Birmingham Hospital, where he was stationed with the Army Medical Corps. Fast forward to the making of the I Love Lucy show. By the time they were ready to put on the I Love Lucy show in 1951, co-workers could already see cracks in their marriage. He'd take off after filming the show on a Thursday night and spend the weekend on his boat with his drinking and card-playing buddies, and Lucy would go home alone. On occasions, Lucy would storm in saying, "To hell with it, that's it, the series is over. I'm not going to work with him anymore." The only conventional marriage they had was the phony one in front of the cameras as Ricky and Lucy Ricardo. Pretending to be a happily married couple was the closest Lucy would ever get to the real thing. During one interview immediately following their marriage, Desi turned to Lucy and said with great passion, "Darling, I love you more than Antony loved Cleopatra, more than..." Abruptly, he turned back to the reporter and asked, "Did you get that down? I'll repeat it. Darling, I love you more than..." Desi's displays of affection were for show. Nibbling on her neck with one eye on the camera shows you where he's coming from. In the days of their courtship, Lucy had succumbed to her feelings for Desi, relentlessly pursuing him, planting spies where he worked, calling him long distance frequently to keep the relationship going, never allowing it to fizzle out like all his other relationships. Their marriage was one of a working partnership. She was the top-notch comedic talent. He was the avant-garde producer. Together, they made beautiful money. But even Lucy agreed in the end it wasn't a good pairing. Desi never loved me. It took me a long time to realize this. The title of the I Love Lucy show was another cruel joke from the deceptive Pisces that was Arnaz. Their marriage was a facade.
And you've had to understand it in your life probably much more than most people, the difference between reality and film, because you had to live for many years, still do, with another image, with an image of a marriage.
I used it when I was unhappy.
What do you mean?
Well, it was always happy in our stories. It was always happy pretending.
And so you'd pretend?
I had to pretend, but it helped.
Just a few notes on Lucy's chart. When the moon was progressing through her 8th house, she experienced miscarriages. When the progressed moon reached the cusp of the 9th in Cancer, it became known Lucy was pregnant. As the moon traveled through the 9th, there was a big brouhaha of having a pregnant woman on television, whether it complied with decency and decorum and social mores. 9th house matters. Desi had talks with religious leaders on what the rules should be. When the progressed moon trined Jupiter in her 1st, she had given birth to Desi Jr. Ratings went through the roof as she gave birth on the very day they aired that episode. When the progressed moon conjuncted Neptune in the 9th, she was heavily interrogated by the House of Un-American Activities because of the communist scandal. When the progressed moon opposed Uranus, it was rumored Philip Morris was pulling out as their sponsor because their sales dropped. Lucy and Desi concluded that it was their job to bring in the audience, which they did, But if people weren't buying Philip Morris cigarettes, it wasn't their fault. And they had no problem lining up sponsors looking to take its place. Lucy and Desi had been divorced a year. The I Love Lucy show is over. This is a hiatus. At this point, she's moving on with her life. She's pushing 50 and is headlining a Broadway play called Wildcat. In February 1961, she had to temporarily suspend the play because of exhaustion and problems with her feet. At this point, the progressed moon is 2 degrees in Scorpio. It has just passed over her ascendant. Then in March, she announces a 1-week layoff of cast and crew because of exhaustion. The progressed moon is now 4 degrees in Scorpio. Now, if you think by the time the moon reaches 5 degrees in Scorpio, passing over her natal Jupiter, everything is going to be all right, think again. Lunar-Jupiter aspects are often seen when people take vacations. Remember that progressed moon trine Jupiter aspect when Lucy gave birth to Desi Jr.? Well, she didn't go back to work right away. She took 5 weeks off to get back into shape. While she was pregnant, 9 non-expectant half hours were shot, 5 of them being used later as post-birth installments via flashback segments to allow her sufficient time to recover after giving birth before returning to work. Once again, Moon-Jupiter aspects give vacation, time off, taking it easy. So in April, when the progressed moon went 5 degrees into Scorpio, passing over Jupiter, she collapsed on stage during her second Saturday performance. Shortly into the second act, during the song and dance number, she lost her breath and fainted. Although she wanted to come back to the play, she had too many injuries and was in poor health, going down to 96 pounds, partly from grieving about the divorce. So the play was kiboshed at this time, and now she had a rather permanent vacation from the play. I wonder if there was some sort of insurance payout because of this unexpected end of the play. Moon conjunct Jupiter in Scorpio. So we're going to leave it here. See you in the next video.